Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Junior Developer Podcast. Today we have Jack Herrington with us. So, hi, Jack. So, Jack,
Hello.
do you mind introducing like who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm a principal engineer and I do mostly full stack stuff, so front end and back end. And I also host a YouTube channel called The Blue Collar Coder.
Big fan myself, man. I
Oh,
love
thank
your
you.
content.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Oh, thanks, man.
So,
Very cool.
today we're gonna discuss a lot of things. We're gonna discuss Micro Frontends. We're gonna discuss module federation. A lot of stuff in place. But we're gonna go ahead with start off with something basics. So I want to start off by talking about like how do you. So this is one question which every time I ask anyone, they have a different perspective altogether to that, right? Depending on their seniority level and all, right? Depending on how much experience they have. So how do you decide like how to organize your files in a React app? Like what all things do you consider while organizing it? Yeah.
I consider the functionality of the different parts and pieces. So in general, we're going to have like, depending if it's a multi-page app, probably a directory full of pages. There's certainly probably going to be a directory full of components. There's probably going to be a directory for the front end store, maybe also the API, GraphQL queries, things like that. So yeah, kind of breaking it down at the high level into the big functional parts and pieces of the app. I don't get super stressed about it though. It's not something that I think about all that much. The one point I've seen where people get kind of feisty about it is whether or not to use aliases. So, the kind of at components / my component name or whatever. And I think that's become less contentious because the build tools have started to uniformly support the syntax for that in package JSON. But, back in the day, and when I was building build tools, it was always a pain in the butt to deal with the linkage stuff. So, but I think aliasing is fine now. So yeah, but other than that, as I say, you sort of break it down into its component parts and pieces, and then when the application gets too big or you start needing to share stuff out, then you're going to have to look for alternate locations for that.
Yep.
Like npm or module federation.
Something of that sort. Yep. So I think especially when you're starting off, when you're let's say you're the sole developer or there's just few development folks, then initially it doesn't matter much. But as the code base grows, right, a lot of things you have to consider in terms of functionality, readability, and all. At that point of time, if the decisions which you took while like during the inception when you were actually going ahead and working on the code base, if they turn out to be wrong, then in the long run it affects your productivity, developers' productivity a lot, right? Compared.
Sure.
It's definitely a good thing to spend some time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But if it's that bad, you can usually go and do like a refactor pass over a weekend or something like that, and then everybody comes back in on the Monday or whatever afterwards, and you're like, okay, so here's the new layout and all that. Plus, on the Visual Studio Code side, if that's what you use, most all IDEs do this. There's a shortcut for doing Command P or in finding the file by name, or if you're using TypeScript, which I absolutely recommend.
Yep.
Then you can go to type definition and you just teleport right to the file.
Yeah, it makes the job easier, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go ahead and talk a bit about performance as well. So since you have worked both in startups and also big organizations, so when do you think is the best time as an organization for me to start investing in performance?
Sure. I would say if you're looking at doing a proof of concept app or a CMS like backend app, something that's going to admin the site, I wouldn't worry about performance. That's not an issue on that one. But if you're doing a front end facing app, one that's actually pointing towards the customer, like the homepage or cart, checkout, whatever have you, then I would invest in it absolutely at the start of the project. Get it into your CI/CD flow, get it into your PR flow, so that you're grabbing those web vitals, you're making sure that your time to interact is great, and it's continuous, and you're monitoring it continuously as the product evolves. And then on the PR side, it'd be great to know if a bundle, like the main bundle or any of the sub bundles, code splitting, is getting so big that you need to deal with it, or if there's a big delta between the pre-PR and the post-PR. So if somebody's going to bring in the moment library on you or something like that, and your bundle's going to get super big. Right, being able to know that and make that part of the PR process would be really beneficial from the start, and it gets the team culturally thinking about performance as part of their jobs, which it certainly is.
So do you think that's the better way to go ahead, or do you think having a separate performance team altogether who is just taking care of performance of an app, which one would be better in the long run?
No, I think you have to go and like. I think you need a little bit of both, but I think mostly it lies with the team itself to make sure that they've got the bundle split up properly, that they're doing lazy component loading and stuff like that. Wouldn't expect that a performance team would be that far into the code base. What I would expect from a performance team is overall site metrics, and also making sure that if they're doing things like having a shared vendor bundle where everybody's got the React version, all of that, the shared dependencies, they're going to be the folks that are going to make sure that everybody's on the same version so that the customer is only getting that one big vendor bundle once as they traverse the site.
Right. Sure. And what are the strategies could you share in terms of improving performance of a web app?
Number one would have to be bundle splitting and lazy loading. Just make sure that you got the smallest possible payload going to the server or going to the client right away. You can do service workers, although they can be kind of hairy, I would say. And then I think then you start to look atomically at the code itself. You can start using memoization. You can start looking at like how the store is performing. Are you getting like large repaints on small changes, stuff like that?
So component level, basically.
What's that?
Component level.
You can go all the way down to the component level for sure.
All right. And what about the similar question for the test as well, right? When do you think it will be a good time to start investing in test cases?
I think as a person who's working in startups, I never go for like necessarily 100% testing. I'm unit test coverage. I generally go for like an 80%, and then I cover the areas that are unique IP and not necessarily UI, right? Because the UI tends to change quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to unit testing, I'll check things like API contracts, any kind of client-side validations, stuff like that we're doing, because that would be to me the unique IP of the company, and you want to make sure that that's always stable, like a rock. And I think that's something you should start off really early with, is a really nice comprehensive set of unit tests, and then. I would certainly, I kind of look at it as a pyramid, right? With a big wide base of unit tests at the bottom, maybe some integration tests, and then a very small set of EDE smoke tests up at the top, just to make sure that everything is kind of working together. And that's another thing you can put into the PR flow, would be a quick check of the EDE smoke tests.
Okay. So initially you start with unit test and go all the way towards smoke testing, right?
Yeah, eventually. Yeah.
All right.
But definitely getting that nice solid layer of unit tests down the bottom is really important. And on any project, you should have at least some unit tests running. There's got to be something in there that you can test.
I mean, even if you forget to, or if you decide to not go for it towards the starting or towards the inception, then when the code base becomes huge, right, it gets really difficult to start up with unit tests, right? It's a pain in the ass, to be honest. Like, we all will agree. And we all have seen one or the other code bases where this would have happened at least once, right? So it's better to yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, when it comes to, I actually look forward to it myself sometimes. Like going if I get a bug around some piece of really hairy code that has no unit tests on it. I mean, the first thing that I'll do if I'm going to refactor it is to put on those unit tests and at least kind of capture the logic, even if it may be flawed, just to make sure that we get the same results every time. And kind of building that out can be kind of fun. Just it's like a puzzle. You're going in there like, oh, what does this do? Why does that work that way? And then once you've got that, then you can go in and refactor and really just make it really clean and really nice. So it's not like a big project is not recoverable. You can always go and add unit tests in later.
True. Couldn't agree more. So have you also tried TDD, test-driven development?
Once or twice in my career. I will say when I do like a project that's like an engine, like I know, it's going to have this set of inputs and this set of outputs, and I just need to like work the interior of the interior of that black box. Then yeah, absolutely, doing TDD is great because it's a very discrete set of inputs and outputs, and I just need to make everything work and pass and good to go, right? And that's a great feeling. But me personally, I'm kind of an exploratory programmer.
Okay.
I get in, I kind of have a vague idea of where I'm going, and then I just kind of code that way. And so sometimes, going a little bit overboard on the TDD thing can get in the way of that experimentation and kind of slow the process down. So it's a give and take, but there's certainly some project for which TDD is just beautiful.
Initially, I think it does, decreases the velocity of the development process. But I think in the long run, it might be a good investment, depending on again
Mm-hmm.
what's the product you're working on, right?
Yeah, exactly. I will say, boy, when it comes to unit tests, there's a thing called Wallaby from, I don't know,
What's that?
Wallaby JS.
Okay.
It's a VS Code extension that runs your unit tests as you type, and it is phenomenal. Like if you're really into that sort of stuff, it's great, and it actually does it without you saving the files.
Oh,
So I'll be coding. I'm not even hitting save, and I'm watching all the tests go from red to green or whatever, and watching all the code coverage because it puts little circles next to each line to say whether it's running in green or yellow or red. Yellow meaning like you haven't covered all the potential variations on that, all the options, and it's just so much fun. It's actually it's just a fun thing to do. And then I find myself actually seeing that everything's passing and then remembering, oh, I got to save all the files. And I save all the files and I go to Yarn test and I run it and it's like, wow, it worked first time. And it's a great feeling.
true, couldn't agree more. That's exactly like there has not been a lot of times when my code runs at once, but whenever it does, it's a great feeling. True, like this is something I speak for every developer, right? It's true for every developer.
Yeah. It's like a hole in one in golf. You're like, woo, yeah.
That's true. Yeah. So I also want to talk a bit about micro frontends and monorepos, right?
Mm.
So this two are completely different things altogether. So like I love the way you explain stuff. So I would want you to brief us about what exactly is monorepos and like what exactly is micro frontends. Then we'll go a bit deep on both of them.
Sure. So when it comes to micro front ends, let's just paint a scenario, right? You're building a big company site, and there's actually a bunch of small teams that are working together to build that site. There's one team that does like the homepage, and there's another team that does the product detail page, another team that does the cart and checkout page, and you may have a shared component library between those different applications. You may not. But invariably, you'll have a product manager who says, hey, I'd love to see this product carousel that we have. I want to see that go from the homepage to the PDP page, the product detail page. And then the question becomes, cool, okay, great. Do we want to go and take that product carousel and extract it from where it was in the homepage and then bring it into an NPM module, a shared NPM module that's maybe in a monorepo or maybe just in like Artifactory or whatever, what have you, and then share that over to the PDP page? That's certainly the conventional way to do that. But the problem is that if you want to update that product carousel, then the person that's on that homepage project has to kind of get up, get out, move over to that project, make the change, right? And then bump the version, publish that to NPM, bring that into homepage, and then go and have a Slack chat with the guys over in PDP. Hey, we got a new version, you got to go bump it, blah, blah, blah. And maybe in a monorepo that's a little bit better because things like Learner are helping you do that.
Yep.
But that's a lot of parts and pieces, right? That's a huge process. If you just want to share some code and the end result is it becomes something people, oh man, I don't want to do that. That's, So there are a bunch of options out there for you to share that code live. Essentially, you do that extraction into NPM, and then you say publish to S3, and there's something called single spa that allows you to kind of package that up in a nice way, and then import it on both sides in that packaged way. That's really nice. There's another one called Open Components. I think that was from Open Table. They were doing a similar sort of thing. Single spa, I would say, would be the most evolved in this. And one of the extra niceties that single spa does is that product carousel could be written in Vue, it could be written in React, it could be written in vanilla, whatever, and it gives you a normalized container so that all of the components, regardless of where they are, how they're implemented, have the same surface area. Kind of similar way that web components kind of packages this stuff up. And so until module federation, that was pretty much the state of the art. You'd go and extract that again, still extracting it into its own project, and then you'd wrap it in single spa and send it up. And then module federation came around, which is a new extension on Webpack, a new feature in Webpack 5. It's absolutely baked into the core. There's nothing, it's not an extra plugin or anything like that. It's part of the core now. And what it allows you to do is, let's just say that you're that homepage team and you want to go and take that product carousel, you can literally just expose it. You can go into your Webpack config and you can say expose that product carousel file, module, whatever, as product carousel, right? And then on the remote side, or on the consumption side on PDP, you basically just point your Webpack at that remote entry that it creates for you, and then you just import it. You just import it like it's any other component. There's no wrapping. There's no containerization, nothing like that. It handles all that for you. All the dependencies are all managed for you. It's really, really clean. So you get those two big upsides. One, you're not extracting it into a new project, which I think is a huge win from a exposure side. And from a simplicity of exposing it side. But there's a big con there too, which is that as a maintainer, I might not know that this product carousel is being exposed, right? And so I come in, I'm making changes to the API, I'm refactoring. It's like, it works on my end, works great for homepage. And then, we publish, and then boom, the PDP page blows up because now their interface is all wrong.
This is where test cases could solve it, right? Yeah,
and there's the E2E test and all that. Absolutely. It's a great mechanism. It solves that problem of having to extract code. The only thing it doesn't solve is using a React component in a Vue app or something like that. And so the single spa folks have actually now they're recommending that single spa sit on top of module federation, and then you get the best of both worlds. You get that cross-platform capability if you need it, but you shouldn't. I would say if that's not something you need, then don't go through that effort. It's not worth it. It's just extra stuff that you don't need. But yeah, it's a great tool, and it's a really cool space. But basically, I call it runtime dependencies. That's really what it is. It's just basically, if you had something you want to share and you were thinking about NPM, well, that's a build time dependency, right? And this just gives you that ability to have a runtime dependency.
And so for if we go ahead with single SPA, right? So how does the CI/CD pipeline looks if you have multiple frameworks or something?
Oof! Wow! Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're doing single spa and you have multiple frameworks, it should be fine, right? You should have that carousel project. It should be packaged up, and then let's assume we're not using module federation. That would be its own CI/CD pipeline, and it would then go and push that out to S3, and that's it. I mean, the other applications should be able to continue running with the current code base and just consume those runtime dependencies as is. And so that's the big win, right? The classic example here is the header and the footer in a microsite architecture. So you've taken a big app that had a header and a footer, and it was on every page. All you had to do was just put in a tag, and then you broke it up in microsites. And now, what do you do with a header, right? You got to have a shared header. And so what folks do is they'll go off and they'll build their own build process, build chain to go and create this kind of vanilla S3 header or whatever, and they'll bring it in every page as sort of a unique thing. But what these tools in Module Federation and Micro-Frontends allow you to do is sort of package that up in a standardized way, so that as you say, right, you can do CI/CD and have it very predictable. One of the really cool things about Module Federation that I neglected to mention was that you can actually do kind of a fallback pattern because of things like React error boundaries. What you can do is you can say, okay, I'm going to bring in my header or my product carousel or whatever, what have you, and I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to asynchronously import that, but I'm wrapping it in an error boundary, which means that let's say that person went and they changed the product carousel and they blew it up, right? Right? And it now goes on a PDP. Well, it blows up on PDP, but it gets trapped by the error boundary. And then what happens is when the error boundary trips, then you go back and use the NPM version. So you can also export the product carousel via NPM, and you would then lazily import that as sort of the safe fallback. It's not as current because it was whatever the code was when you last built it, but it's at least up to at least something. It's not like it didn't bring the page down. So there's really nice things that you can do from an architectural standpoint to kind of get the best of both worlds, to have that runtime updating, but also have a safe fallback if things don't work.
That's interesting. I did not know about that. And any other challenges did you face while working with Module Federation?
Oh wow! I mean, so that almost all of 2020 started with like going through very early days with Zach on his first release of Module Federation out of his own repo, and then getting into Webpack, and then having Tobias went in and did a lot of rewriting, changed the interface, and so there was a lot of kind of changes over the year that kind of tripped me up here and there. But once you get it going, it's actually very, very reliable. Tobias Coppers, who's the lead maintainer on Webpack, has done a tremendous job of making sure that the sharing works really well. The dependency resolution that's in there is fabulous. It's a really nice piece of code. It's kind of up to Webpack sort of production level standards.
Yeah. I mean, earlier a lot of folks were skeptical if this is the right time to use Module Federation in production level or not. But I think a lot of folks have started implementing it in their production server as well, right?
I hope so. I'd love to get some feedback. I'll get folks, DMing me on Twitter or whatever. Hey, we're just going to go put this out into production. It's like, yes, great. Let's do it. Give me some sort of case study, or just tell me about it so that we can, because people always say to me, they're like, hey, Module Federation looks great, but where are the big players using it? Is Twitter using it? Is, Microsoft using it? Google, show me somebody big, and nobody that big that I know of has yet to really fully embrace it.
We'll get there.
But I think but I think with that fallback, as I was talking about, like it's kind of a zero risk thing.
Yes.
Right. If it doesn't work, it just you just fall back on what the latest build was. Not too bad.
Sure. So let's talk a bit about state management as well, right? Where do you see the state management scene heading to in 2021?
Redux all the way. No, just kidding. So let's go over the history, right? So when React first started out, we were all about component state in the classes, and then we got the kind of one-way data flow Flux thing, with that Facebook really promoted really heavily, like with the Flux library and all that, but the Flux pattern, right? So you had these actions and these and this pattern of a one-way data flow, and then state became the sum of all evil. If you have state in your state tree, that's not idempotent, and oh my gosh, it's terrible, right? And then Redux became the culmination of that, but Redux kind of brought in a little something different. Like it brought in functional programming. as this sort of paradigm, and you had high order functions, you had functions calling functions that would return other functions. And it was really hard to, like, I was not only working with it, but I was also teaching people how to do Redux as well. And I could teach React in an hour. It would take me 2 days to teach Redux. And people started hiring for React Redux because it's React, but it's Redux, that kind of thing. So it was this really alien model, and people there were some folks who really, really liked it, and some folks, I think a lot more folks who really didn't like it. Were like, oh, React was great until Redux came along. And then fast forward, I guess, 2.5 years ago or so, we got hooks.
Yep.
And then suddenly, it became, state in the component became fine again. Let's do state in the component. Yay!
Back to basics.
Great. Back to basics, exactly. And then so Redux started kind of tailing off. Like, oh, maybe you don't need this massive state manager, but you kind of still need global state, and maybe use context and use state together aren't really doing it for you. And so there's now this void, right? We had global state, and then we don't have global state anymore. We got component state. Well, you do, but whatever. But maybe there's that need for some shared global state. And so there's been this huge set of new component libraries, state management, what I call micro state managers coming out. And those would include things like Recoil, and then a whole bunch from the genius Daishi Kato, things like Zustand, Jotai, Valshio, React Tract, a whole bunch of small libraries that make it really easy to share different parts of state. Oh, actually, XState is another great one.
Yep.
A lot of people love. MobX State Tree is actually making a kind of second pass at it, although I think people will have some issues with having to model their state in their particular types. But as I say, so lots of great options. And now the question kind of becomes, we got this huge matrix of things that we can choose from, which one is the right one for your application. And so that's going to be, I would say, the kind of primary theme of 2021 is, I've seen some various flow charts of, hey, well, if you need this kind of state, then you use this one. And if you use that kind of state, then you use that one. And we'll see where that goes.
So,
but personally, I love Valshio.
Oh,
sure.
Nice, okay. I was about to ask the same thing. Personally, which one do you prefer?
Well, I would say Valshio and Jotai would be the two that because they're actually different models.
Okay.
Valshio is basically sort of a MobX kind of light thing, and then Jotai is this very unique atom-oriented approach to state management, which I think is very, very cool. And actually, Daishi has refactored the library so that they're these more atomic atoms, and you can kind of compose them together, much in the same way that you would have a custom hook, right? Okay. So the intention behind React hooks always was, you can use state, and you can use context, and you can use ref and all that individually. But what you really should do is you should build up some custom hooks, right? And that custom hooks, then all the little parts and pieces, the little Lego pieces of that are use state, use ref, all that jazz, use effect, all that. And that kind of composability is really cool. And so what he's trying to do is move that into Jotai. So you build up these larger, more complex atoms using parts and pieces. And I think he just released one where it was he's integrating React Query as an atom, which I think is really cool. And he's also integrating an XState atom, so you can have an atom that's a state machine. So that's really cool as well. So there's some just really great stuff going on in the React state space, but I don't think there's any clear 100% winner in there, much like Redux was. I mean, that was everybody's going Redux there for a little bit, but I don't know if we're going to get that this time around.
I mean, definitely a lot of state management libraries are coming soon. like coming here and there, right? So I'm sure if I
Hmm.
ask you the same question 6 months down the line, your answer might be completely different.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Although I know Daishi will probably be at the center of whatever it was. I know that much for sure. He's really heavy tracking on that state management stuff and creating a lot of those great libraries.
Alrighty, sure. Can you also share, some productivity hacks for developers which worked out really well for you, maybe?
Okay, so first off, you got to be pretty intense about your schedule management. That's a big, productivity hack for me is like carving out about 2 hours out of every day to kind of get into what I call the flow state, or what a lot of folks actually call that flow state, where you're turning off Slack, you're turning off notifications, the trying to get the family situation is toned down or whatever it is, and so you can absolutely focus on what it is that you're doing and get deep into it. And the reason is that you can be super productive in that and get a lot done. And it's a lot. And I think the quality of work is a lot higher because you don't get that sort of Swiss cheese effect of like, okay, I'm in the middle of this bug. I'm really deep into it. I understand all the edge cases. They're all in my head right now. And I'm going to start working on the unit tests for this to go and get all those edge cases covered. And then, oh, that meeting happens or that Slack message happens. And now, oh my gosh, I'm pulled out of it and I go and handle that. And then I got to go back into it. And then I got to get back into that world of it. And I think the first layer of that is you always see the happy path first, like how it's going to work, but you lose those edge cases. And so your tests aren't as good, or it takes you a long time to get up to that level of testing where it would have been a lot shorter had you maintained in the zone like
Mhm.
that. And then another productivity hack I would say is try not to work 7 days out of the week, right? Try and reserve a whole day to do something other than tech or coding or whatever. I know we kind of, we all want to do continuous learning and all that sort of stuff all the time, but your brain, like you can only push so much stuff in your brain before it sort of pops out your ears, and you're just overloaded by it. So reserve reserve some time. Have a day where you go out and play some soccer, go for running, go read books that are completely unrelated to code. Play with a family, do whatever, but don't code at least one day out of every week, I would say.
Sure. The first thing which you mentioned, right, about the flow, there's also something called as deep work. Have you heard about that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's actually a book which my manager recommended, which is right here. It's Deep Work by Carl Newport. I'm reading it. So it talks a
Yeah,
lot
excellent
about
book.
all those concepts, right? And like personally, it has helped me a lot. But again, I
Yeah.
do find some issues towards focusing for a long time. But I think I'm getting there. So that worked out pretty well for me. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Meditation helps.
Surely.
And trying to find like maybe the first 5 minutes or so of any trying to get into that, just sort of clear your mind, hold a bunch of deep breaths so that you're not trying to keep up with stuff. Oh, another, I guess along those lines, be a good note taker. I find that if you externalize whatever is in your head right now, like, oh,
Oh
I've got
yeah.
these 5 things that I got to work on, right? And you're constantly looping on, your brain is constantly looping on those 5 things. Don't forget it. Don't forget it. Don't forget it. You're spending a lot of your CPU, your brain CPU, just maintaining that list of items, right? And that's distracting you from doing other things. So just externalize it. Just write it down somewhere, and then your brain's like, "Oh, okay, I get it. It's in an Evernote file somewhere, or it's in whatever it is."
Yep.
And then you can let go, and you can start using your whole brain on whatever it is you're working on.
Freeing up your mind definitely helps a lot. Yep.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Also wanted to ask you one specific question. So, like, I'll tell you what happens every day. I go to Twitter, I see a new library coming up. Then I open YouTube, I see a notification that you have already uploaded a video for that library. So this has
Really?
happened. Yes, this has happened multiple times. So I want to understand, like, what exactly is your mental model while learning a new tech? How do you explore things?
Um, that's a really, yeah. So I first try to figure out what's the use, right? What's a use case for this? I mean, what real world problem are we trying to solve? I mean, that's the whole idea of like blue collar coder is like, I'm very about practical stuff, right? You won't see me, for example, doing a video on like Ramda, because it's just very, very low level. And, if you want to, there are great docs on that, and that's fine. But I tend to look for projects that will really impact folks in the real world, front end folks, things like, what's a new GraphQL adapter? What's a great new animation library? Yet another state manager with a different model. I have a bunch of different sources for where I get information. That would be RSS feeds, and actually Chrome News is actually really good for this.
Oh, okay.
Tech Twitter is great. There's a whole bunch of different sources that give me information about new libraries, new things that are out there. And then I always look for stuff that is going to have a practical impact on who I think my audience is, which is primarily front-end folks, but some back-end folks as well. So, things like GraphQL adapters, animation libraries, visualization libraries, new component libraries, state management, stuff like that that's going to have a real practical impact. And then I look to see, is it differentiated to the point where it would make it's a new mental model for folks? Like, as an example, Jotai, that atomic storage state is really different. Like it's different than other models, and so being able to explore that is really cool. And then when I construct a video, it's along the lines of, how do I create a project that's entertaining, but that also shows the benefits and is kind of you can walk through and then get some example code at the end. And then really, I guess I'm a little bit different from other YouTubers, and then I'm not trying to do like a follow along, slow paced thing where you're literally coding along with me. I mean, you could, if you can, I guess. You're pausing a lot. But at the end, right, you have a product that you can then, and I hope this is what folks do, is they clone that and then they just start playing with it. Here's a good starting point. It's up, it's running, I can start it, I can play around with it, and then I can go and kind of tweak it and turn it into something that's useful for me.
Interesting. I should definitely try that mental model out. Sure. So I think then even I'll be able to build some more videos on some other state management library coming along. Sure.
Yes, please. That there's so much. YouTube is such a huge fan base and subscriber base. The more that there are, like I'm kind of bummed sometimes when I see a great library like Valshio or Zustand, and I'm the only person talking about it because they're so good, and there should be 15 people talking about it.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this, Jack. Thanks a lot. We talked about a lot of.
Well, thank you for having me.